Hello everyone, welcome to the Expert 2023 series. We're going to open and admit everybody as we start this lovely February afternoon, evening, morning, night time for some. And thank you everyone for joining today. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, can we see? Yeah, everyone's there.
Hi.
Hello, people.
Hello, long time no see. Hello.
I've missed you so much.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Hello, hello. A lot of familiar faces, new faces. Lovely to see everybody. I'm just bringing everyone into this space and just checking that we've got everybody here. And I guess over the first few minutes, we're going to have some joiners. So I'm going to be addressing them too as they come in. I'd like to ask you to mute yourself if you haven't yet, so that if there are any dogs in the background, children, I don't know.
Coffee machines,
bulldozers, whatever, so that we're all right with that. Yeah, letting in Vicky. Okay, so welcome everyone. Those of you who don't know this series yet, it's the ILCA's one and only Expert 2023 series, which started in 2019 actually, so it's 4th year running. So yeah, that's really super. And my name is Gabriella Kovács. I'm here co-hosting with Ian King, who will be our expert today. So I'm just supporting the work that he's doing here today. And we're going to be exploring a very exciting topic, something that I think doesn't get as much attention as it might. So it kind of came up for Ian that we could host some sort of talk about it. And I said, is it okay if I join you? And he was very nice to say yes. So I'm honored. And we're going to move on and have a look at what our topic is for today, and is the supervision. So I got that right, so that's all good. So yeah, supervision, what do we have about that? Ian, would you like to say a few words about yourself? I think everyone knows me, so I'm not going to say anything about myself. You can look me up anywhere. Ian.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Ian, indeed, Ian King. Originally, as you can perhaps hear, from England, and I'm now living in France. I've been living in France for many years. My story, if you, in a brief version, you'll be relieved to hear. The brief version of my story is that I was after studying French in Scotland, I came to France to teach in university. Very quickly got sick of teaching in university. Decided to switch to the world of corporate language training. Worked as a trainer and then as a manager, and then still as a trainer, but also as a manager, and eventually as a, what do they call me? Director of learning, which is the official title. Still for this company, which I worked for about 15 years in Paris, which was cool and exciting. And one of the things that we did at that company was a very exciting program for Airbus. And the topic of that training was English for English speakers. The purpose of that training was to help English speakers in working for Airbus to better speak English with their international colleagues. In other words, less English. That was one of the topics that we worked on at the time. After a while, I got sick of working for that company, decided to leave, trained as a coach. When I say trained as a coach, I mean trained as an executive coach. That was in 2011. I trained in a place called HEC, which is very famous if you live in France. It's a big, famous business school, and they have a very expensive training program there. And set up by myself as a coach and with my own company. And so for the last 10 or 12 years, I've been working as a language coach still, also as an executive coach, in other words, on topics which have to do with management and leadership, how to work with teams, but usually with an international dimension. and also leading team buildings and lots of other trainings to do with communications and public speaking, meetings, leadership topics, etc. And for the last, how long, Gabriella? Last couple of years, I've been involved with ILCA. It's a great pleasure. Trying to help ILCA to develop further the whole world of language coaching, which is something which I believe in as being very important. Something I've been doing, and maybe several of you have been doing language coaching without necessarily calling it language coaching for a long time. And these days, I guess we're more and more daring to call it language coaching. And I see it as my sort of, I'm going to say something a bit pretentious here. I think of it as my mission in life at the moment to help to develop language coaching and give it the credentials and the value which I believe it should have on the market. Because as we have all discovered at various points and perhaps on a daily basis, language services are often undervalued by our customers and by the people who buy us. And I want language coaching to have its full value recognized on the market, so that we can all earn a decent wage and become better known for it. So that's my brief story. And I think supervision is a part of that process. But we'll talk more about that in detail. The other thing which I should, and this is the long story, the other part of the thing which you need to know about me is that I'm one of the organizers of the world's first whiskey marathon. There you go. That's a true story. I organized the world's, I think, only whiskey marathon. It's a real marathon which takes place in Scotland, and we give you whiskey at the end if you finish. True story.
So that's true incentive, isn't it?
That's the, but that's, well, I mean, happy to talk about that, but that's not really the topic for today. And it's my pleasure to discuss this with Gabriella, who I love chatting to. So it's a great pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking very quickly, coming back to the whiskey, it kind of caught my attention, the external motivation.
That's right. That's it.
Right. Okay. But moving on. Okay. If anyone's interested, then get in touch with Ian. But we're going to move on to more calm waters, so to say. So moving into water a little bit. So yeah, this analogy, this metaphor rather, that if you've got an empty cup, then there's not much that you can offer. So how to fill that cup up or that glass up and ensure that what you are providing your clients, the learners that you are working with, is of full value, which then again is valued by the other stakeholders, for example, because they know that you're undergoing supervision, mentoring, doing your training, etc. But we're going to go through that step by step. So let's move on and have a look at what we have for today. As usual, we've got a pretty clear structure so that you know where we're moving. Today, we're going to look a little bit about where supervision fits in terms of the coaching spectrum, the coaching context, particularly language coaching, but obviously I think it can be discussed in a more broader scope. Then we'll look at various definitions of supervision, why it's necessary at all. So why do we think it's an important part beyond getting paid more? I mean, obviously that's not the only reason, there are a number more. We'll be looking at what the benefits are, and Ian's going to come up with a plethora of case studies, which I think are really exciting. And he said we should hurry so that we get to that bit, because that's going to be the interesting bit. So I've got to be very careful with how much I talk, so I'll try to be very brief. Then we'll look into how this fits in with the regular coach, CPD, or professional development, whatever you want to call it, and then what the next steps are, maybe with ILCA, maybe with other organizations, and then hopefully if we're lucky, then there's time for Q&A, but obviously there will be. Okay, so this is what you can expect. Once again, as usual, if you've got any questions, throw it in the chat box. At the end, we'll address them, unless it's something which is really, really pertinent to what we're talking about. And of course, we're very happy to send you the slides so you don't have to screenshot or anything, but really focus on being more present with us, so to use a coaching term. Okay, so we're going to move on. And oh yeah, this was a challenge. We wanted to, or I wanted to visually show what we can see here, what we call the professional development journey. And we had a bit of there and back with Ian of how to represent this properly. And we came up with this, and it's complicated, but I'll try to talk you through it very briefly. So we're starting down at the bottom with phase 1. Anyone who wants to become a coach or is interested in finding out more about coaching starts with the training initially, which might be, for example, something that Ilka offers. It could be any general or more niched coaching training. These are offered globally, online, face-to-face, blended form. There are a lot of different varieties. They're usually very fantastic. It's a huge big step to understand what coaching is, and especially for educators to understand how it's different, and also how it can support education in general, so teaching and training formats. So that's the first. I think the initial training is usually about understanding, so what is this, what's going on, how is it different, how do I start using it? And then we get into the practical phase, which is phase 2, which is the peer coaching, which you start, hopefully you start practicing on other coaches, because it's good. You get direct feedback, you get a lot of reflection out of it, and it's really, really useful. It's also part of specific professional development, and in a lot of trainings it is actually expected. Also, this is going to be the phase where you start getting specific client experience. So you start coaching, basically. This is where you even ask for money, perhaps, for what you're doing. So you're not just, okay, I know Tommy, I know he needs a bit of coaching, I'll just coach him, and then hopefully he doesn't run away at the end of it. But this is the more serious phase. Okay, so you actually dare to say, yes, I'm a coach, and I'm offering my coaching for X dollars, X pounds, X euros, whatever. So this is where you actually start seeing yourself as a coach. Then we move on to the third phase, where we've got autonomous professional development. We realize what our limitations are, where we're seeing challenges. So we start exploring on our own, and we start looking at things like webinars. We start reading up, we join perhaps clubs, different Facebook communities, etc. We start commenting, discussing with other people, for example, joining our expert series to find out more about what's going on in coaching. And there are so many things available. It's just incredible. So this is where you start opening up again. And then again, you notice that, yeah, I think, yeah, this and this is missing for me. I have to do some more training. So this is number 5. This is the further PD steps in phase 4. Where you're looking to add more training, more workshops, more courses to be more in line with what you feel now is what you specifically need to be a well-rounded, very skilled coach. And then there's also mentoring, which we're looking at it at the last bit of this road, but of course mentoring can happen earlier also. It's working with a mentor where you're looking at specific areas that you know you need development, and you're looking for support from a mentor because you want guidance from somebody who has much more hands-on experience in that area. Okay, so you're working with their experience, their counsel. Where does supervision come in here? Ian, do you want to say anything here?
I can answer that question if you like. So as you can see, there's this sort of big arrow coming in from the left of the screen there. So we're sort of thinking that supervision belongs in that area of what you could call, that sort of final stage of development, if you like, as a practitioner. So it's in that family of things with mentoring, with added professional, added training courses, etc. Perhaps this is the moment to make a distinction, is it, between supervision and mentoring? Shall we go into that immediately? Because there's often a confusion between what we think of as being supervision and what we think of as mentoring.
Yeah.
So when we think of mentoring, what we think of really is being guided by somebody who's already done the thing that we're trying to do, pretty much. In other words, and perhaps you've done this, several of you have done this. I've done a little bit of mentoring, and it has much more to do with giving advice. I've been there, done that, transmission and passing down your experience further down the line, typically to somebody who's more junior than you, if you're the mentor, and receiving that wisdom, do this, don't do this, you might want to be careful with this. And the coaching stance might be part of being a mentor. But for many mentors, it's much more to do with, this is what I've done, and this, I hope this will help you. The stance of the supervisor is much less about giving people your wisdom about what you've done. And being supervised is basically the coach's coach, coach for a coach, or coach for a group of coaches, if you will. In other words, the stance of the supervisor is to provide that role that we provide as coaches for our clients, but for coaches. So we're asking questions, we're asking people to generate awareness of what they're doing, we're asking people to think carefully about their practice, we might be giving them some feedback, we might be giving them a mirror, all of those things that we know about as coaches, and that we would perhaps like to benefit from as someone else playing the role as coach for us. There is a notion of, and this is something, I'm jumping ahead to a slide which is further down the road here, but never mind. There is, in the word supervisor, there tends, there's an idea of, super, but it's not, and it's important to say this, it's not a question of overseeing somebody's work. It's not a question of being in charge of somebody's work. The supervisor is not responsible for or overseeing or managing the work of, there's no hierarchical link there at all. It's just the supervisor would be somebody who is more experienced, more senior. That's all.
Facilitating, right?
Sorry?
Facilitating. There's
yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. But there is such a thing as training to be supervisor, and those courses for supervisors would ask, in order to enter a supervising training, one would be expected to have experience as a coach of, I don't know how many years, but so in other words, a supervisor is an experienced coach who helps other coaches to grow and to develop in their own practice in a sort of coaching mode, mostly. Okay.
Yep. All right. Okay. So this is the overview, and hopefully it's a little bit more clear how these connect with each other and how they build on each other, and how they can also work parallel to each other. So maybe I put autonomous learning at this certain point on this journey, but for certain people it might start much earlier, or maybe a bit later. I don't think so, but it could happen earlier. Someone might be doing workshops, external courses much earlier, and maybe someone would only start working directly with clients a little bit later along the road. So I think everyone has their own, individual course, but more or less these are the steps. All right, okay, so we're moving on. Hopefully, yeah. So this is the same in bullet points. I think we can just jump these.
I think we can jump this too. Yeah, I agree. I think we've talked about it already, really.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the things. So we don't want to be convincing anyone. Okay. And then we get into what we have there, the supervision.
So we started talking about this already in terms of what we mean by definitions. So what is it to be supervised? The idea of supervision is it's a form of professional support for coaches. I've no idea about you people in the court in this speech today, in this event today. If you're practicing as coaches, I guess many of you are already. Many of us as coaches, we are kind of isolated. Many of us are practicing our work pretty much individually. Often we're self-employed, and we don't have a lot of support mechanisms around us. We might do, but many of us don't, or we don't have enough. And the idea of supervision is to create a sort of safety net, if you like, around us as coaches, so that we know what we're doing, so that we have greater awareness of what we're doing, and so that we feel supported. And I speak, by the way, as somebody, I should have said this at the beginning, I speak, by the way, as somebody who is supervised, and I've been supervised by a supervisor, a French guy who is about, I don't know, he's 10 or 15 years my senior. And I have been doing so for the last 10 years, like all through my practice as a coach. And I would say that it's probably the thing which has made a difference to me as a practitioner, as a coach, in terms of my development, in terms of my confidence. And that support on a regular basis has been something which has been very valuable to me. Supervision is a dialogue regarding practice. So this is just to insist on the fact that it's the coach for the coach. So in the similar relationship that as a coach, we're not telling people what to do. We're not in that position of superiority or in that position of advisor or a consultant. It's a dialogue between people who each bring something to the table. Well, it's something similar with supervision. In other words, it's dialogue. An opportunity to reflect on and give meaning to client work. Again, how often do we have that opportunity to think about our cases, to discuss tricky problems, to talk about our credentials, to improve our strength, to talk about our blind spots, to someone to give us feedback about how we're doing, the progress which we're making from month to month, from year to year. I often say that supervision is a question of getting three things. It's getting help on cases, tricky cases. It's about development. In other words, getting insight, getting some feedback about areas which we don't know so much about. Have you thought about developing this? Have you read this book? Have you thought about this? In other words, growing. And thirdly, perhaps, it's often a way to help coaches, I would say, how can I say that? Mature. In other words, become more, get deeper in their practice, become a stronger coach, gain confidence. I hope I'm being clear here. What supervision is not, as I've said, supervision is not overseeing or being in charge of a coach's work. That's absolutely not the question. So this word of supervisor is sometimes, we had a debate even with Gabriella a couple of weeks ago about whether we wanted to promote the word supervisor, and we decided to continue to promote the word, to use the word. It's not about the use of, somebody overseeing someone else's work. Just to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that it really is a dialogue and it's co-development.
That's right.
Because it's also beneficial for the supervisor action. So it always bounces back, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Into their work and their reflection.
So thank you for the link to the next word. So that it does involve co-development. So what we're talking about when we're thinking about this is not only in groups, but often supervision often happens in groups. It might happen one-to-one, it might happen in a group. In other words, a group of coaches working with a supervisor. Or possibly with two supervisors at the same time, that can happen. Should we talk about co-development, Gabriella? Should we mention what we mean by co-development, or do we assume that that's...
I saw nods, so yes.
we see nods. So briefly, so the topic of the talk today was not co-development, but in a co-development spirit, in other words, several people coming to a meeting and people bringing a case, each person bringing a case, and the group discusses one or several of those cases in a very structured way. And that process is led by a facilitator. So that's what happens in a lot of group co-development and a lot of group supervision, I'm sorry. In other words, the group discusses the cases which are brought by the participants. It's not something which is decided by the supervisor. The supervisor doesn't say, okay, today we're going to talk about this. It emerges from the needs of the participant.
Mm.
The second piece there you can see is guidance and input from the supervisor. So the supervisor might give a little bit of input and say, okay, I'm going to tell you about this today, or this case reminds me of this. Have you thought about this? So that's where I guess that's where the seniority part might kick in. In other words, from my experience or from my training or from other cases which I've seen, this makes me think of that case. You should go and read this book. You should think about this case. That's what I mean by guidance or input. Again, I repeat, it's not, you must go and do this. I think we have more definitions on the next page, Gabriella.
We do.
Including the official one. There's an official one there.
Yeah.
So as you can see on the bottom of that slide, I say official because the ICF, International Coaching Federation, has a definition, as indeed do all of the other organizations. So as you can see, it says coaching supervision is a collaborative learning practice to continually build the capacity of the coach through reflective dialogue for the benefit of both coaches and clients, which I guess is what we've just been saying. Except perhaps there's a notion there which is important, I think, is that all of this process of supervision is really for the benefit of the final customer. It's a guarantee, it's a kind of safety net, it's a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. It's part of a guarantee that what the coach is doing is professional, thought out, reflected. In other words, we're not inflicting ourselves on our customers. In our initial training as coaches, of course, we have plenty of input about that. But in fact, we're very free to do as we wish once we're practicing. And I think supervision, and this is well known, by the way, by people who are working in companies, HR professionals, and people who are prescribing coaching, they know that supervision is one of the key, how can I say, safety nets in the practice of coaching, which protects everybody involved. In other words, if you've got a space to discuss your cases on a regular basis, you're less likely to go off on a tangent and, as I say, inflict yourself on your clients. And I use the term with a little humor. But the idea is to gain awareness and try not to be inflicting ourselves on our customers without any idea of what we're doing. So yes, supervision is for people who are trying to better their practice, to continually improve and be aware of their blind spots and fully show up as coaches. There are other ways to do that, of course, but supervision, I think, is one of the ways to do it. And it's recognized as such by the ICF, for example.
Indeed. Ruth has a comment here. Thank you, Ruth, for that. So in supervision training, we are taught that supervision is not coaching for coaches. It's normative, formative, and restorative in function. And this is Proctor's definition. So it's not particularly coaching, but I guess it would have coaching elements in that there's a lot of active listening and that sort of thing. I don't know if there's anything, Ruth. Ian, can we involve Ruth? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah, Ruth, anything that you'd like to comment?
Yeah, it's a really sort of, it's very similar. Sorry, I trained with ICCS as a coaching supervisor actually only a year ago. So I've been working as a coach supervisor since, and almost everything I'd completely agree with, apart from the fact that there is an element of ethics and ethical oversight.
Absolutely.
Coaching supervision as well, that can be a little bit different. And one of the things that really it took me a little while to get my head around when training as a coach supervisor was that aspect that goes involves almost a little bit of mentoring as well. So taking that stance, and I'll give you an example. So particularly with contracting.
Mm.
So actually offering that support, because a lot of things that coaches bring to supervision are to do with issues that have arisen out of a lack of clarity with contracting. So yeah, I just think Proctor's definition is so helpful. Talking about it being normative, so looking at the norms of good coaching practice and ethics and contracting, and formative, so sharing strategies and techniques, and exactly what you were saying in a collaborative practice of you know, having peer supervision coming in, people sharing their strategies and experiences.
Mhm.
And then restorative, just that opportunity to talk through those sort of situations that come up, because as you say, Ian, it can be quite lonely sometimes working, especially if you're working online. And being able to talk with fellow professionals and practitioners, particularly in group supervision.
You're right, and it does have to do. There is that dimension of providing. How can I say? Yes, the word, you know, to use the technical term, the normative insight. In other words, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
In other words, you know, this is what, you know, in the world of coaching, this is what we are supposed to be doing. Remember, and I'll talk about that when I talk about my own case. And this is why I wanted to go, because this might appear a bit abstract to people at the moment. I'm aware of that. So I really wanted to talk about cases as much as possible, and I'll talk about it with my own case. Can we move maybe to the next slide?
Can move on. Yeah.
So this is a bit more concrete, perhaps. Some reasons why one might want to be supervised, or why one might need to be supervised even. So maintain energy. In other words, you know, how can we focus and maintain all of our resources available for our work? Strengthen awareness of what qualities we have. Again, this is inputs which we might get in our initial coaching training, or in our peer coaching, or in later trainings. To strengthen that theoretical base, continually be aware of what's happening in the world, in the world of coaching, in the marketplace of coaching, and be able to verbalize what it is that we do. Sometimes, and I speak from experience, sometimes one has a feeling that one's doing okay, and you're doing okay with a customer, and you're coaching that person quite well, but how is that working, and what are the mechanics of that? What's working, what's not working, what's the dynamics between you as a coach and the client, and how can you account for that stuff? And so some of us have a journal which we keep, for example, to keep track of our own work. And supervision is another way, another opportunity to practice verbalizing what it is that we do, so that we can be more and more accountable to ourselves and to our customers and to anybody who's asking for us. Strengthening credentials. So this has to do with our credibility as professionals. In other words, and I'll repeat something I've already said, many people in companies and institutions who are prescribing coaching, including language coaching, are more and more aware of, let's see, the requirements, or the expected requirements for somebody who calls himself a coach. And if you've been to ILCA events in other moments, then you'll know that we're very aware of this in ILCA. It's something we're trying to constantly think about. How can we make ourselves as credible as possible as language coaches? So yes, we need training. Yes, perhaps we need to belong to professional organizations, the ICF, the EMCC. There's one in France where I live, which is called the French Society of Coaching, and maybe you have local ones in places that you're living too. And the third plank, the third strand of that is being supervised. In other words, it's a badge of professionalism. It's a badge of showing to customers and saying, yes, look, you know, I take this seriously. I talk to somebody regularly about my practice. As I say, it's a guarantee. We've talked about professional development as well. We talked about going deeper and gradually deepening our practice, and supporting ideas outside of the sessions, trusting the self to mature. Anything you want to add there, Gabriella? Have we?
Well, I think I've got another slide which I jump to, if that's okay. Yeah. So should be here. Yeah. I thought about it from this perspective of how to overcome certain limitations, which is another perspective, what it is that you don't want to have, and moving away from that so that you can be looking at yourself, a better self, a better version of your professional self, which is, something that we always say, the kind of mantra. But so you don't want burnout, you don't want to experience that feeling of being stuck and not being able to support them the way you feel that they should be, but you feel kind of primarily professionally inadequate. So that yeah, I should be working on this, or I should be somehow setting boundaries, or yeah, I know this is what I'm not doing well, but not being able to actually facilitate growth for the client, and feeling kind of a minor to them in a certain way. So you want supervision there. You want to be knowing what I think you're going to be talking about that, what your blind spots are as a professional, and working on that in the supervision process is really beneficial. You might also have time issues regarding, yeah, you're kind of coaching, but it's kind of taking much longer than you think that the client has, and you feel that you could be speeding things up, but you just don't feel you have the tools or the technique, and you're looking for guidance. So in that case, it's the input that you're expecting perhaps from a supervisor, so that they can support you with that. You start doing things, you get into a habit of certain things, and maybe as Ian said, you might be moving into one direction which is not really viewed as coaching as such, but it might be more into, especially with language teacher background, it might be more training, or it might be more teaching. So let's not call that coaching. And once again, supervision, it could be a space where you can discuss what it is that you might be looking at. Also looking at ways to, I talked about time, which also transfers into money for the client. So you want to be very aware of how much time you're spending together, how to make the most of your money, of your client's money, and basically you want to be much more efficient in the work that you're doing. Looking at pressure and stress, there can be, especially if you're working, for example, in a corporate environment, there can be quite a lot of stress on you to deliver development and performance growth for your client in a relatively short period of time, and you might not be able to handle that. So once again, that could be something that needs this kind of support. Situations which are simply inconvenient for some reason, ethical dilemmas. Ruth brought this in, mentioned it, but it's a very important thing. There could be ethical dilemmas, once again, especially when you're not necessarily working with a private client, but there too, there could be certain boundaries that need to be, there could be certain practices which are not, which you're not paying attention to, or not in the right way. So once again, being very observant of these things, being more aware, going deeper. What is it that's not part of coaching? I've mentioned that. And also being clear on where you or where your client is biased. You might not be able to see the process from that perspective from the outside. There again, an experienced, more mature professional is going to be able to provide insight on that. So just briefly talking through that. So moving on. And here we are with a case study. Yeah, we're good. Very good.
We're good. Okay, that's good. So I want to talk about these three cases to put it so that maybe it's a bit more real. And then we need some time for a bit of question and answers. And thank you for the comments in the chat, which I've just been reading while listening to Gabriella. So let me talk about these three cases just briefly to give you a feeling of what the role of the supervision might play for somebody. So this person is somebody who I've been working with myself. In other words, someone for whom I was playing the role of supervisor. So the basic focus that we had, and by the way, the work with a supervisor is going to be contractual as well. So what are the objectives? Like we have a contract with our clients. What are we working on for this period of time? What are the outcomes? We're trying to focus on this and this and this. So for this person, the focus was their professional project. This person was someone who's starting out as a language coach. The focus was their professional project. In other words, how can I get this thing up and running? Where am I trying to get to? Where am I with this project? How can I go from A to B to C to D? How can I move into a certain area? So we worked a lot on the niche that person wanted to get into, how they could brand themselves, what they could say that they do, what could be their claim to the world, how could they put themselves out there. The work that I was trying to do with that person was often helping that person to make choices which they might have been able to make by themselves, but they probably made a bit faster, I guess. In other words, my work was as, let's say, as a catalyst to help that person go through that process faster than they might have done without the help of somebody. So examples of things we actually did concretely with that person: we wrote a bio together. They wrote a bio with some help from me, with some pushing from me. They identified their USP, what their approach was. This was to do with making things explicit, which they didn't really know or they weren't fully aware of. This person was a good practitioner this was. So my job was to help this person get it out, get it written down with some deadlines. Unique selling point, thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. I helped that person to go a bit faster. In other words, my stance with this person was basically go for it. And so, yes, I was a bit closer to what you might think of as a mentor stance with that person. Having been through this process myself, I was able to give some examples of stuff that I'd done. So that's one example. Can we go to the next one? Sure. This is an example of somebody who I know well, not somebody that I supervised, but somebody who I shared supervision with. None of these names are real, by the way. I've changed the names. This is somebody who I was supervised with, very experienced executive coach, someone who's older than me, been doing the thing for 30 years. And her issue that she brought to our supervision group, because it was in a group, was basically it wasn't her declared issue, but the theme that was running through her cases that she'd bring every time was she was judging her customers, she was judging her clients. And it was something which was quite delicate. It was sensitive. It was a very sensitive issue. Because, we all know this as a coach, we try to be in this non-judgmental frame of mind. And yet she was slipping into that kind of judgmental type of frame of mind. Also because she's a person with very strong character and very expert in her field. So she was tending to get into a sort of high position with people and sort of tell them what to do or be judgmental. So her underlying need was also to be connected with her clients. And what she worked on was we did case feedback. So this was the supervisor leading the session and the rest of us in the group adding our inputs and our insights in a co-development type of process. And what I've written there as our supervisor and peer stance was we were trying to give her both positive feedback and honest feedback, positive strokes and honest feedback. And that was where it was a very sensitive, it's always sensitive working with this person. Her whole issue was trying to trust herself. And this was for someone who was an experienced practitioner. And she works on this every time. It's an ongoing process. The last case study, and this is me. So this is me, really me. If you want to share that, Gabriella, thank you very much. So this is me, as in, this is not a change of name. This is really my story. So my real focus from being supervised was working on legitimacy and confidence as a practitioner. I came from the world of language teaching, trained as a coach, did it properly, trained as a coach, started practicing as a coach, and I still, often I'd come across the feelings of, self-doubting myself and wondering if I was doing a good job, and having difficulty explaining myself to my customers, brackets in French, by the way, sometimes. So the work that I've been doing with my supervisor, basically this is the theme and going through the whole of this supervision, which I've had myself, has been various things. There are three things I put there. One of them is preventing evaporation. In other words, stopping. When I say evaporation, I mean becoming more aware of the value of the work that I'm doing, writing it down, for example, in a journal, getting value from what I'm doing, not forgetting what the good things I've been doing, and trying to be aware of the less good things I've been doing. Managing energy has always been important for me. That's something which my supervisor was able to give me some inputs and to help me channel energy well. In other words, my supervisor's stance with me has been back to basics, what I call back to basics. And that kind of echoes what Ruth was saying earlier. In other words, my supervisor's stance with me has been sort of, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Remember, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is the framework you're in. Don't forget about this. So his questions to me have always been things like, well, what questions did you ask? And did you properly write a contract at the beginning of the training, at the beginning of the coaching? Did you do a three-way conversation at the beginning of your coaching with the person's boss? Yes, no. And what happened in that moment? Did you do it right? And is there anything you missed? And what questions did you forget to ask? And how come you think that the coaching has gone off track now? What might you have not done right at the beginning? Those are the kinds of questions which my supervisor was asking me to keep me on the straight and narrow, if you like. What Ruth calls, I think, Ruth, the normative, if you like, approach of helping someone to, I would call it, stay on the rails, if you like. So those are the three types of input which one might get in supervision in those three cases.
Okay. And if anyone has any questions, I wrote in the chat box. You can drop it in the chat box, but also keep it for later so that we can a few more slides then. Yeah. Okay.
So those are some things we've already covered. Some of those things. These are examples of things which might come up, might be addressed in a supervision session. It's just a list. It's not exhaustive. There could be others. So it could be an opportunity to vent a frustration or get feedback about a frustration. It's often a moment to work on one's well-being and balance as a coach. And just a mention there of a question which Carrie asked, which I thought was an interesting question. Is this similar to how counselors and therapists participate in supervision? Yes and no. I'm always reluctant to associate coaches with counselors and therapists because I think we don't do exactly the same thing. Huh? But we share some practices, and one of those practices, I think, which is a good idea, is to be aware of what we're doing. And therapists typically have an opportunity to share with somebody else, to think about their own practice. So again, so they're not inflicting themselves on their customers, on their patients. And we're not working with people who are sick, typically. We're working with people who are healthy as coaches. But we can still inflict ourselves on them. And I think that opportunities to be aware of our blind spots and what we're doing well or not well is just huge. It's massive. And one of the things which we can think about is, how well are we? How well are we? And what can we do to stay as well as possible, mentally and physically, in order to be there for our learners, customers. So yes, crisis, dilemma, being blocked. We could develop all of these things a lot more. I'm conscious of time as we go through. We mentioned ethical dilemmas already. Need, distance, and options to start working on. In other words, a path forward. And thank you, Natalia, for your comment. That's a nice link to what it says there about looking for options to start working on. What might come out of a supervision session would be, okay, we can take this action, we can take this action, we can take this action. These are things that you can do to get back on the saddle and to actually start being creative and active again with a case or with a learner who is getting us down or we're frustrated with, etc. Gabriella, help me. What have we not said here?
As a language coach, I think it really is about, because most language coaches, I'd say 90% of language coaches come from an educational and teaching background specifically. Teachers tend, I don't want to generalize, but it's my experience. I've done quite a lot of teaching, training, coaching, mentoring for language teachers. They find it so difficult to focus on themselves, not in the sense of being aware, they're fully aware, but focusing on the me, on what's important for me, for what I need, and to cater for those needs, even physically. So health issues, but also, mentally. Am I okay? Am I feeling okay enough to really be able to enter that room and provide what the learner needs? Because I might be really dogged down with a lot of issues that are going on for me, because I'm burnt out, I'm frustrated, I've got a series, wide scale of things going on for me, and I'm not addressing them, and I should be, and I'm pushing everything down. So I think this plays a very large role for a lot of teachers for a variety of reasons again, but being more aware and being able to develop with those and to be able to take better care of ourselves, because then we can, it's not the empty cup thing. So I think that's a very, very strong thing. And also this idea of ethics. Very often teaching is in a very closed climate, so to say. So we kind of go and we do things the way that people tell us what to do. In coaching, we're much more independent, so to say. So we are working much more independently from perhaps a specific organization, especially if we're working freelance. And it's also true for freelance teachers. So having that connection and so basically having a hand to hold. I know that might not be the best way to say it, but so to be able to turn to somebody when you feel kind of lost and you really want to deepen that concentration and the professional aspect of what you're doing. I think I said a lot of things all over the place, but the two key things there. Ian.
I'm just thinking about my answer to the question which Natalia put in there. As a language coach, do I have to find an experienced and trained language coach to be my supervisor? My answer is I'm not completely sure. I don't know. This world, the world of language coaching, as we know, is it kind of emerging. So, we are in the middle of something here, which is kind of emerging as something which is becoming a well-known discipline. It's not yet a well-known discipline by Joe Public. So we don't know yet, really. I think that so it's an excellent question that you're asking there, Natalia. I think there are specific topics and specific issues that we have as language coaches, which non-language coaches might not understand or might have less insight or less input to have. I'm thinking, for example, of the whole area of language learning psychology, which is a specific field. And language learning psychology, which we're confronted with the whole time, we're faced with demotivated learners. We're faced with tricky cases, people who don't want to learn languages, who are demotivated, who can't make any progress, who are fed up with themselves, who are fed up with their teacher, who are fed up with whatever it is. And the whole field of keeping the right distance with those people, providing motivation to them, providing insight for them into the cases that they're working on. It's a specific field, I guess, and it's an emerging discipline. So I would say that, you know, that's something which we should try to think about developing, and doesn't yet really fully exist.
Sure.
That's my answer to that question.
Yeah.
Should we welcome other questions? Maybe other more questions out there?
Questions. I'll also move on here. Yeah, there's just that how it blends with other coach PD things that we've already talked about, and yeah, there is a lot of accountability, which maybe a workshop or a training might not have so much. So because it's a pretty long process. Ian, once again, you know much more about this, but it's something which you can come back to regularly, like on a monthly, bi-monthly basis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So some people, I mean, I've been supervised non-stop for the last 10 years because it's something which I feel is absolutely vital, and I've never got bored of it. And it's always been very useful to me. In other words, I've seen my supervisor every month or 2 months, pretty much for the last 10 years. So that's, for me, has been absolutely, but other people do supervision in a more of a stop go way. So they'll and some people switch supervisors quite frequently. Some people will do it from, you know, for a period and then not do it and then come back to it when they need it, which is the example of the very the second case which I mentioned on the slides, which she was called Natalie. So she comes in and out as she feels she needs it.
So there are different patterns or rhythms to it also.
Absolutely, yes. And some people would sign up for something which is an individual basis. Some people prefer a collective supervision.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's something here from Judy. Okay. Comment on using yourself as an example and being authentic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's true. Thank you, Judy. Yeah. Absolutely true that you. Very transparent in your communication about being in it. I'm very transparent. I'm looking for supervision, so I'm still ahead of it. So that's something that's going to happen for me, definitely. Yeah, and it's a good technique. Yeah. One or two closing comments, like we're really aware of time. Identify where you are, what you need. Do you need supervision? Do you need mentoring? Do you need an additional course? Can ILCA support? Do you have to look externally? Are you looking elsewhere? Take the plunge. It's definitely worth it. Ian's been doing supervision for 10 years, and we've been learning about it, and probably a lot of you have different connections with supervision. It's definitely something worth exploring. Anything else here? Yeah, Q&A. There's a little bit of further reading just for definitions and any additional material you might be interested in. Once again, we're happy to send the slides, but I can also put it into no, I won't be able to do that. I wanted to put it in the chat box. I'm not doing that now. Yeah, we've got something here. We need better coaching in IT agile teams, and it could be used. I agree, but there's also, it's been called agile coaching, which is a completely different fruit tree, I'd say. So that has its own methodology completely. So being aware of what agile is and how that works, what the communication systems are there, what the expectations are, the whole hierarchy of working in agile. So that's a different thing, but I agree. So IT organizations will have their own sort of.
It's perhaps worth mentioning, just in response to another answer to that question, is that increasingly there's a field emerging, which is supervision of managers, direct supervision of managers in companies, or supervision of executive committees, for example, where a coach / supervisor person would go into a company and not have a hat of being a coach, but have a hat of supervising the work of this team or that team from an external viewpoint. In other words, listening to what they're doing, trying to understand how the system works, giving them some feedback. And that's something which is an emerging practice. That's something which that's something which, as Judy says, I've had some experience of doing myself. And I've heard of people going into, so in other words, IT teams, for example, or agile teams are one example of an organization or a team which might benefit from various kinds of supervision. And all of this stuff is moving and developing quite a lot at the moment. It's a whole world of experience which is emerging as a discipline.
True, but also there's this thing of agile. So when it's not implemented well, that's when there are so many communication pitfalls. So when you've still got the waterfall kind of approach, and then you bring in the agile, and then there's this kind of mixed structure. So that's also an exciting thing.
Can we say, Gabriella, that we are intending to, we're hoping to offer some supervision as part, through the ILCA channel, in due course. There you go.
We are indeed. We haven't got specific dates yet, but we are going to be offering supervision. Ian's going to be offering supervision rather, so that's going to be part of what we're offering this year. Of course, we're also offering a lot of other things. We're quite active this year. We have been active. We were active last year. We were in London this year. We're traveling to France. So if you want to have a little bit of bonjour, then this is definitely a year. We're holding a 2-day conference this year. You're going to see some of us, well, me and Ian definitely, and I don't know, I'm kind of careful here who to say. I know Carrie's going to be there, obviously. Vicky also, I don't know about Judy Russo, quite a few people here who are going to be joining us there and presenting, holding workshops. So it's going to be very exciting. Registration will be up soon. And in the meantime, we also have our field program starting at the end of March. So if you missed our early cohort, we've got the next one. Also, we've got my book. I'm going to say that. So if anyone's interested in purchasing or joining a chat about it, I have a chat talking about chapter 2 next week. So once again, check it out on social media. I'll be posting about it. And I'm just checking if there are any more questions here. Okay, all right, okay, sure. And yeah, we've got thank you. Yeah, and Judy, yeah, we'll see about that. Are there any other questions? I think we were quite relatively brief, but quite in-depth regarding
well, we certainly more or less stuck to the program in terms of timing, so that's good.
I think we're excellent. We're very good. Yeah, time management was really good. I don't know if any comments or anything that you'd like to say, then do say so. No, we're going to be closing soon.
Many thanks for your attendance. Good to see some people, so many people. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for being here, and we'll continue the conversation, definitely. So thank you very much for being here, and yeah, I think we'll close it here on this positive note. Thank you very much for being here and yeah, spending your time with us. So thank you, and goodbye. The recording will be on our YouTube channel shortly, so thank you very much again. Okay, I'll stop the sharing and I'll also stop the recording. Okay.